Okay, welcome everybody to this webinar. We get started. So today we're gonna discuss the event-driven architecture, which you can use from your SAP BTP suite. This is a presentation which is presented by Solace and Rojo, and in today's webinar we will address topics on how to introduce these EDA concepts, and also mention some stuff from customers, real-life customers that we work with today. Before we start the meeting, if you have any questions, please use the chat functionality in this meeting, and there's moderators on the chat, so we'll see what comes in, and we'll manage it either throughout the meeting, or if it's a question that we'll address for the broader audience, we'll bring it up to the Q&A afterwards. So the agenda for today, as I said, we're just going to introduce EDA concepts. We're going to talk about where EDA has been applied, how it's applied in modernization concepts for customers nowadays. We'll do a little demo, and afterwards explaining building the business case, and do some Q&A. So we're looking to take up to an hour to get through the content, and so let's get started. So first of all, it's Solace and Rojo that are going to present today. So both companies have an exclusive partnership with SAP. Solace provides the advanced event mesh to SAP, and Rojo is providing the integrations and adapters to SAP on the Cloud Integration suite. So we both know a lot about the SAP environments, and we know a lot about the BTP suite, and we're going to discuss some of these topics today in this meeting. So who is going to present? It's going to be from Solace, it's going to be Christian, and from Rojo's side, it's going to be Ankit. And Martin and myself, we will be hosting the session and moderating the chat, and we'll be in the introduction and in the end of this presentation. So before starting, what I would like to just give us a takeaway for the people attending. If it's about like integrations, if you are working today in integration space and you're looking to modernize your integration domain, just think about throughout the presentation what you can do with your integrations, because there is multiple options nowadays, because there are many transformations in the IT application landscape happening right now. For example, you got selection of new cloud-based applications. There is upgrading of existing applications, for example, SAP's transformations in the ERP space with the move to HANA. But also there is an introduction of new technologies to better leverage the potential of data, as the challenge of handling ever-increasing data volumes, which impact your IT landscape, is big. But as a result of these things, your integration domain is impacted as well and needs to be rationalized. So this can be by either consolidation of your integration platforms, or migrating away from legacy integration platforms and introduce modern iPaaS platforms, or introduce new technologies to support the need for handling large data volumes. And most likely it's all of the above. So listening to what we present today, I would like you to think about what do you do with your current integrations. You can move, as you can see, to integrations, but also today there's the option to make it an event-driven integration, or to some integrations are actually events, so it's not an integration at all. So this is what I would like to give as a takeaway. Keep in mind, if you listen to the story being presented by Christian and Keith today, what can be applicable for yourself in the future when you modernize your integration domain. And with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Christian, and he will take over and do the introduction from Solace part.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen here. Thanks very much for the introduction, Hugo. So as Hugo said, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into event-driven integration and the benefits of the decoupling aspects. But before we get there, just wanted to set the scenes for those of you that are new to event-driven architecture and event-driven integration on what are we really talking about here, right? So the context for event-driven architecture becoming so popular is really that we live in a world of more. And a lot of businesses are facing these challenges that you see here. So they have more and more applications that need to communicate with each other. These applications are more and more distributed. So we're talking about multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and edge even as well. And at the same time, the data that these applications are producing is going up by 25% every year. At the same time, we have the expectation that those systems are being synchronized more quickly. A lot of our users, our customers, they expect that their data is readily available and accessible, and any updates to their orders are available to them and even pushed to them on their mobile phones in microseconds or second latency, and not like an hour later, a day later, and so on and so forth. So all of these is making integration more difficult these days. And we're going to look at a little bit the integration patterns that we've been using for many, many years and why they are not always fit for this kind of challenges, right? So if you've been working in the integration space for some time, you'll recognize these patterns. You'll probably use them still a lot, and I definitely see that with a lot of our customers that this is still being used quite a bit. So batch delivery is whenever a system produces a file at a certain time of day, or maybe at a certain interval multiple times throughout the day, or it may be a replication job that replicates data from one database to another. We also see a lot of point-to-point, specifically in the integration space with iPasses and APIs being called. That often means that one system communicates directly with another. So you get a tangled web of applications communicating with each other if you use this type of patterns to integrate these systems. In addition, if you're using APIs, there's often the need for the downstream system to ask for the data. And because the downstream system doesn't know when the data changes, they often resolve it to periodic polling. So they'll ask maybe once a day, has this master data been changed? Please give me the latest master data. Or they maybe poll every hour to get updates on certain things like orders or customer addresses or similar things. At the same time, all of this is more decentralized, as I said in the beginning. So the data is scattered across several domains, and that is a contributing factor to making this harder these days as well. So the challenges with these patterns is really that batch delivery, because it happens at certain times of the day or at certain intervals, it means that most of the time you're a little bit out of sync. Maybe you're quite a bit out of sync. Depends on how fast the data changes, obviously, and how often you're syncing here. But in general, like there's always a bit of a delay with data changing in one system being replicated to another system. So that's one of the challenges. With point-to-point, the challenge is that because you're connecting many systems directly with each other, with the increased number of systems that you have to communicate with each other, there's the complexity rises exponentially, right? So it can be quite complex to really have systems like ECC and S/4HANA who are communicating to almost all other systems be connected to all of these systems. Lastly, periodic polling has the challenge that either you ask infrequently and you miss a lot of the updates, and it's kind of similar then to batch delivery, that you're out of sync a lot of the time, or what happens on the other hand, if you do need real-time updates or near-time updates, is that people often resolve to polling excessively. So instead of asking once a day or once an hour, maybe they're polling APIs every minute or something like that. And the challenge here is that this puts strain on both the source and the target system, the source system having to schedule this and having to call this source system, but the source system also having to then look up those changes in their databases. That always depends on the system, but that can be quite resource intensive. So periodic polling can lead to excessive resource utilization when most of the time there isn't really an update to be propagated. Yeah, and lastly, with decentralized, so if you can't really connect systems easily and well, it generally leads to siloed information. So we're not having a up-to-date view across all our systems, across all our business. So how does the next generation of integration look like? What could we do to make this better? And there's three key patterns here that we want to use in this case. And one of them is the broadcasting pattern. So whenever a source system has data that has been changed that needs to go to other systems, we want that to be pushed out. We want that to be broadcasted, a little bit like a radio station, right? So flash alert, news coming out, you want to just put that in the airwaves, and anyone who's interested, they can listen in. So just keep that in mind as a concept. Obviously, there's security controls around that, so not all the data is accessible freely, but it is much easier to get to the data and plug in new downstream radio consumers, so to speak. Another aspect is the decoupling aspect. So you don't want the publisher to have to know who are all the systems that need the data. It's a bit like a baggage handler in an airport, right? You don't want that baggage handler to take one piece of luggage at a time and then try to locate the passengers whose luggage that is. Instead, you want some decoupling. So in this case, the baggage handler, they just put the suitcase on the belt, and it goes through partition. They don't even see what's happening on the other side. And on the other side, you have the passengers waiting, and they will just identify their piece of luggage and take it off the belt. So it's much more efficient because the luggage handler doesn't need to wait for the passenger to be there to have to then take the suitcase. They can just place it on the belt. It acts as a shock absorber as well. So there's plenty of space on that belt, and a lot of suitcases can go there, and the luggage handler can just carry on putting more suitcases on the belt instead of having to wait for the passengers to pick them up. Lastly, because the data is increasing so much these days, we do need some way of filtering that data. So we don't want to tune into a radio station where all kinds of information is shared, multiple languages, multiple sources of information, and all gets wobbled up. Instead, we want to be able to selectively pick the data that we want to receive. And so in this case, we use topics for filtering, and our topics have multiple levels. So you can really pick the information based on metadata that is available. So for example, if there's events about trucks being published, I could say I don't want the truck leave events or the truck loaded events or any other type of these truck events. I just want the truck arrived events, right? So you can put a very succinct subscription that will basically filter all the data for you, and that will reduce the load on these consumers. So similarly, payment done could be another subscription, so we don't get all the payment issued, payment approved kind of notifications. We just get the ones once the payment is fully done and through the system. Okay, so what is event-driven architecture now? So taking these three patterns, what we have often is that a source system creates an event, and an event is a significant state change in data, and it wants to push that out into the world because there's other applications that need to know about it. So if you would take an example here from the slide, a customer may be purchasing a product. That could be an event. Or maybe you have some industrial IoT use case and you might have high temperature being detected by a sensor in a machine. That could be an event, right? Or from the aviation industry, maybe a passenger boarding a plane a little late, that could be another event. So what is the common thing with event-driven architecture here is that all these events originate in one system. Sometimes it could be multiple instances of a system, but they need to go to multiple systems often. So you might, in the customer purchase example, you might have an inventory system that is interested in that, and the system might want to do something with that information, like decrement the in-store stock and the online stock, right? Likewise, the merchandise management system might want to keep watch on the stock level. So whenever a customer purchases a product, it might want to check against the thresholds and request new stock from the stock room. And at the same time, the customer loyalty system might want to update the reward points for the customer in real time as well. So to achieve that, you need a system that is global in nature, that is hybrid, possible to deploy in various scenarios like hybrid cloud and multi-cloud and edge, that can connect all various diverse technologies, and obviously needs to be enterprise grade and simple to use. And we'll talk a little bit about advanced event mesh as a product that can fulfill these requirements. But before we go there, just wanted to talk about the pattern of event-driven integrations, right? So when we talked about integration being point-to-point, it can often look a little bit like this on the left-hand side, right? So you have a number of systems on the outside here that all need to be connected to each other, and then there's lots of flows and integration processes that are being written and deployed that connect one system to another. Sometimes you go through chains of these, but it's all leads to a quite tightly coupled architecture. So you end up having a centralistic, monolithic integration architecture. And that makes it hard to change. Now, when we look at the IPO migrations and modernization, we want to keep in mind that there's this event-driven aspect, and the decoupling of the event-driven architecture means that I can split up my end-to-end flows. Maybe I have a small flow on one side and another small flow on another side. Sometimes if it's a big integration flow that connects multiple systems to each other, that could mean that the result, if we convert that into event-driven, means that we have multiple small flows, but they all connect to the advanced event mesh or the event broker in the center to publish events and to subscribe to events. So it becomes a more decoupled architecture. And the benefits of that is really that you get real time because the source system pushes the data as and when it changes. And the result of that is that you get improved customer satisfaction and experience, but also improved insight into your business as well. So whatever happens in your supply chain, you might be able to pick that up in real time as an example. Another aspect of this pattern is that we have what we call fan-out calling. So if you publish an order event, and that might be received by one single system, it is really easy to just add another system. So the brokers can duplicate the data and just pass these copies on to anyone that is interested. And that makes it much easier to add additional systems. So it cuts down on the development time instead of having to check out an iFlow that is already distributing the data to add another consumer in there. And then having to do all the testing to validate that it's working. We can just do this through configuration on the broker. And we just have to write the new kind of microflow for the new system. Okay, so that cuts down on the cost and the development time. I mentioned filtering earlier, so the dynamic routing is an aspect of that. So whenever we have this fine-grained filtering and we can set up our consumers to not having to listen to all potential truck-arrived events or truck leave events and so on and so forth, that can be done on the brokers. And that helps reduce egress charges in cloud scenarios. It helps reduce network bandwidth usage, and it helps reduce load on the interfaces. So the most important one on this slide, though, is the decoupled connectivity. And that's the one that we want to talk a bit more about today. And Ankit is going to show us some examples of what that can mean. But generally speaking, the decoupled connectivity is that conveyor belt in the middle, right? So publishers and subscribers, they don't need to know each other, and they can be more easily moved and changed without affecting each other. So that adds to more agility in your doing changes in your IT systems. And there's some operational aspects to that Ankit will talk about as well. So improved robustness and resilience. So we'll dive a little bit into that in a moment. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that you also need some event discovery or event management as well, because of all this decoupledness, it is a bit of a black box sometimes. Event-driven architecture is a bit tricky in that sense that you don't know specifically who's consuming the events, because that's the key concept, like not having to know this. But for management purposes, you do want to know that. So we have some tooling for that as well that makes that easier. We call that event management or event catalog. So you can catalog all your events, make it easy for them to be found, and for your application developers and architects to collaborate on your event-driven architecture. And that helps with reusability and the visibility and governance in your event-driven architecture. Okay, so just briefly to point you at the products that you might want to take a look at to help implement this. So we'll talk about, obviously, about Integration Suite. We're moving from PIPO to SAP Integration Suite. You'll use Cloud Integration, but to achieve the decoupledness, that's where you might want to look at Advanced Event Mesh, which sits part in that integration pillar and is part of the SAP BTP Cloud Services in the BTP platform. And my PowerPoint froze a second. An Advanced Event Mesh is a SaaS service. So when you subscribe to it, you get access to a cockpit where you can do all the management. So that's where the event management, discovery, cataloging, the designer, monitoring is available. But your applications connect to what we call the runtime or the event brokers. So the Advanced Event Mesh is actually a distributed network of brokers that you can deploy in any environment that has Kubernetes. So you can deploy them in your factories, your shop floors. You can deploy them in public cloud or private cloud in your data center, as long as there's a Kubernetes environment. And then the brokers can all be meshed together. And that means that wherever you publish your events, they can be accessible in any of the other brokers, as long as these brokers are meshed together, right? So that's one of the key aspects, and the technology, the features that provide the flexibility and agility for our very distributed architectures that we have these days. All right, so I think I'm going to hand it over to Ankit now, and he's going to take us through some of those aspects. Over to you, Ankit.
Yes, thank you, Christian, for giving an overview about event-driven architecture and also about the product Advanced Event Mesh. So before we go to the demo part, I think I would like to talk about the aspect of governance. So let me share my screen. It should be visible now. Okay, so if we look across SAP customers and ecosystem, so there are some key initiatives going on. The first one being the SAP PO migration. So SAP PO, that is process orchestration, is the on-premise middleware of SAP, and it is coming to end of life in 2027. So many customers are migrating their interfaces to Integration Suite, or they are in the assessment phase. The second one being new to Cloud Foundry. So SAP New, that is the old solution of SAP Cloud, is coming to end of life also in 2028 from support perspective. So that's also what customers are doing. They are migrating from New to Cloud Foundry, be it BTP apps, BTP solutions, or for that matter, integrations. It is being moved to Cloud Foundry. The other aspect is the ERP modernization. So here customers are migrating their S4 ERP solutions to S4HANA, or they are doing the greenfield implementation. And across these initiatives, one thing which is common is the role of event-driven architecture. So customers going through this journey, they normally try to adopt the event-driven architecture. The common question which they have is, what should be the right first step for this adoption? And in our opinion, the first step should be setting up the right governance for event-driven architecture in the landscape. And governance itself can be a very wide topic, but there are key aspects which we should consider. So if we look at them, the first one is the EDA patterns. So if we are doing event processing within the landscape, it's very important to have some defined patterns which we use across the landscapes. So it will help us in having consistency across the landscape in terms of the patterns which we are using. And when we are doing event processing, errors are also bound to happen. So there should be defined patterns which basically says how do we handle errors, because we would like to be in control that when we want to reprocess these errors, because with EDA we get the flexibility of reprocessing, but which error message should be reprocessed should be defined in these frameworks, and how do we reprocess them, that's also part of these patterns. Then when we talk about guidelines, guidelines in terms of both development as well as security. So when we think of development guidelines, naming convention comes into picture. Design consideration for integrations comes into picture. When we think of security guidelines, we have to think of how do we give access to different topics and queues for publisher and consumers. So they should have the right access to the events. Then when we think of event-driven architecture, it's important that we set the right strategy for tracing, because with decoupling, we are decoupling the integrations, but it's important that we have visibility over the events when they start from publisher and how consumers are consuming it and the life cycle of it. The other aspect is the common data model. So when we have lot of applications in the enterprise, it's very common that we end up having different structures for the same business object, and which decreases the efficiency how we are doing the integration. Defining a common data model in governance helps us in increasing the efficiency of integrations. Then the event portal. So we all are familiar with the API portal, right, where we discover APIs, subscribe to it, and consume it. On similar fashion, also Christian highlighted this, that having an event portal gives us the flexibility for consumers to browse or discover the events which they are relevant for them. And also we can maintain the versions of the events. We can have the contracts of these events between publisher and subscriber for that particular version of the events. All these aspects comes into picture of event portal. So these are the key aspects which we should consider when thinking about governance, and we will also cover few of these aspects in our demo. Okay, so for the demo, what we have chosen is a very common business requirement when we think of SAP master data, that is business partner application. So in most of the cases, business partner is source of truth in S4HANA. And this data has to be synchronized with our CRM system, our marketing system, our procurement system for our order to cash cycle, for procure to pay cycle, and other things. And if we think of setting up this integration without EDA, that is the conventional way, how should it look like? It should look like a bit more like this, where we have point-to-point connection via CI. So it's more almost tightly coupled because every interface is linking S4HANA individually with the target system. So technically, we can achieve or we can do the integration this way, but definitely there will be some disadvantages or some challenges which we have to handle. And if you think of these challenges, the first one will be the error message. So in any of these integrations, if there's any error message, what will happen? In CI, we don't have a reprocessing capability, right? So in case of error, we won't be able to reprocess the error if it was because of some downtime in the target system was not available, or some problem with the interface itself. In CI case, what will happen is that we will have to ask the source system, in this case, S4HANA Cloud, to re-trigger the message. And if we just think of, let's say, bulk replication, you can imagine the kind of load we will have to put on S4HANA Cloud to reprocess these kinds of messages, right? The other challenge is related to the upgrades and maintenance. So as Christian highlighted, we are increasing applications in the landscape as we go along. And all these applications, SaaS applications, have their own upgrade cycle and release cycles. And in most of the cases, we have to coordinate a lot to to fine tune these releases by not running these integrations or controlling these integration during those time, right? And this is quite cumbersome to maintain. So this is another challenge which we have to handle in this kind of scenario. The third one, the processing speed. So all these applications which we have, they have some business logic within it when we are creating these business object like business partner. And they will have their own pace at which they can process the message. So if S4HANA is pushing 100,000 message, it does not mean that S4 Salesforce can process 100,000 message within same time as it is being done by Coupa and marketing app. So you can imagine with this context, having this kind of tight coupling can result to complexity, and we have to handle normally that, okay, how we fine tune our batching between S4HANA and these target applications so that they can be processed in the target side. The last one is the how agile we are in terms of adding a new receiver. So if same data is needed by a new receiver, then how easily we can set up this interface. In this scenario, it's almost like a new interface from S4HANA in CI. So we have to do the settings in S4HANA, do the development in CI, and then we can have the interface, right? So this is the conventional way of integration. When we think of doing the same requirement in event-driven architecture, if we follow EDA pattern, right? In this setup, the source system, which is in this case S4HANA Cloud, will push the message only once to event broker, which in this case is advanced event mesh. And this message will be pushed to a particular topic. And this topic in result will be subscribed by multiple queues, um, depending upon the number of target application which is relevant, which needs this data. Okay, and we can think of this subscription almost like subscribing to a newsletter, right, which keeps coming whenever there's some news, and subscriber can keep subscribing to these newsletters, and so the producer should not be aware of this subscribers. And with this context, what we have already done, if we realize that we have decoupled the source system with the target system. Um, the last step in this setup would be the interfaces within CI, which is having the orchestration or transformation logic to push the message to our target systems. And it can be mapping or basic orchestration. And we can think of them as micro integrations, which is reading the message from Solace queue and replicating it to the target system. So with this setup, if we see, what we have done is we decouple the architecture, decouple the let's say applications between them, and we have also created the flexibility to reprocess the message. And how we have done that is with these queues, because this queue almost act as a persistence layer, which means that if there is any error, they will persist the message till the time it is successfully delivered to the target system and almost delivering the guaranteed delivery of the message. And let's have a look of this setup in the actual system. And we will also create a positive scenario where we create something in S4HANA Cloud, see that getting replicated to all these three systems. And also we will try to create a negative scenario and see how the EDA architecture helps us in handling that error. So moving to the system. Yeah, it's logged out. Let me quickly log in. Okay, so this is advanced event mesh. And here, if we look at the broker, we have queues. So I was explaining that we can have multiple queues subscribe to the same topic. So in this case, we are replicating the data to S4 to Salesforce, to Coupa, and to marketing system. So let's take a look at the queues here. So we have 3 queues, each for one of the applications, receiver application here, that is Coupa, marketing, and Salesforce. So if I open one of the queues just to check the configuration, how it looks, here we can see the subscription. And this subscription is basically where our source system, S4HANA Cloud, is sending the message to this topic. And all these queues are subscribed to the same topic. And if you look at the consumer, in this case, consumer is my micro integration in SAP Cloud Integration, which is consuming the messages, having some basic mapping logic and pushing it the target system. The exact same settings is also in our Salesforce queue, same subscription, and then we have a consumer of micro integration. So this is how our setting looks like in advanced event mesh. And if you go to cloud integration, so in cloud integration, we have these micro integration, which is what I was explaining. The first one is more an optional one, so which is pushing the message from S/4HANA Cloud to AEM. The reason I said it is optional because depending upon my settings and setup in my source system, in case of S/4HANA, we can have AIF also. We can also use SAP PO to push the events directly to advanced event mesh. So it's more about the setup which we are using. But the other integrations, which is reading the message from queues and replicating it to target system. Let's take a look there. Yep, it's loaded. So in this case here, if you see the sender channel here is advanced event mesh, which is a standard adapter from SAP. And here, if you look at the settings, it is subscribing to the same queue, which we have created in our event broker. And it has some other settings which handles how I retry messages and other settings. And then we have some logic to convert the structure and update the supplier or business partner in Coupa using the Coupa adapter. So this is the basic interface which we have in cloud integration. And similarly, we have set up for Salesforce and also for marketing app. I also have my Salesforce and Coupa system open so that we can see them actually getting created. For my marketing app, what we have done is we have created a dummy API in API management to mimic the behavior of a marketing system. The reason of doing this is we want to also create the downtime by bringing down this API. So we will see this in action. And for that, what I will do, I will put this API in the debug mode so that I can see the traffic coming when I create something in my S/4HANA Cloud. So this is my Salesforce, my Coupa, and then we have S/4HANA Cloud here. Okay, so instead of creating a fresh new business partner, what I will do, I will just copy it to simulate the scenario. So I don't have to enter all the details in the webinar. Let's call it EDA webinar demo and create it. So what should happen now is an event will be triggered and sent to event broker. And from there, our queues will receive those messages since they are subscribed to that topic. And from there, my interfaces will read or micro integration will read these messages from this queue and go to and will be replicated to Salesforce. So if I look at my event broker, I won't see the message here because it is happening in real time in fraction of seconds. So we won't be able to see the message coming and going here. But actually, I can see these messages or logs in my cloud integration to confirm, yeah, these were replicated. So if I see, I have created these styles explicitly to monitor these interfaces. If I look at the first style here, I see that message is replicated to Coupa at this time, which looks good. Similarly, we can see the message replicated to Salesforce also, and also to my marketing system, right? If I look at in my Salesforce here, let me copy the ID of this business partner which got created because we have to search for that. And here, if I look at all accounts, and I have a filter here. So let me put this filter. Yeah, so this business partner is created here as customer. Let's take a look. Yep, it's just created now. And if I go to my Coupa system, that is procurement system, Same thing should happen. I should be able to search for this business partner. Yes, this got created as well. And in my marketing system, which is via my API manager, oh, I did not click on start debug, but yeah, the message was processed successfully by Salesforce, Coupa, and also with the marketing app. Now, what we will do is we will create a scenario where let's assume one of the application has a planned downtime or is not available because of some error, right? In this scenario, what should happen? So if I do this by undeploying this API um, and doing some change in my business partner, technically what would happen is this business partner change will be replicated in my Salesforce and Coupa, but should fail for my marketing app. So let's make some change in our BP. Here, demo, let's call it error and save. Looks okay. So if I look at queues, yep. If you see here, what is happening? There is no messages in Coupa, but there is one message in marketing because it is stuck. So my micro integration is trying to process this message, but is not able to. So if I refresh my screen in Salesforce side, it should be updated. Yeah, it's updated. Same thing with my Coupa. It should also be updated. But with my marketing app, it should be failing. And if I go to my monitor back, this is my marketing app here in monitor. It's in retry. So it's retrying the message um, with the defined configuration, which we have done in our interface. So in this case, I have done it for 5 times for the webinar perspective, but it should be designed or set up based on the error handling framework which we have defined during governance, right? So it will try for 5 times and then it will be failed. But does that mean that I have lost this message and I cannot reprocess it? The answer is no. So the message here, if I look at in my event broker, it has mapped to dead message queue because this is how we defined the settings. It tried for certain number of tries which we wanted within certain interval, and then it moved to dead message queue. And from here, what will happen is that I can have an automation which can move things from dead message queue to the respective queues depending upon my type of error. And from there, when my system is up, based on our convenience, we can reprocess this message. So let's do one thing. Let's bring our API back. We will deploy our API. So it's being deployed. And we will move the message from DM queue to the main queue. It is done. And then if I look back in my event broker, yes, the message has moved from here to marketing app, and it should be also gone from here because my micro integration is constantly listening to the message here. So if I go back in my cloud integration, I should see a completed message. That's what here it is. So now, even though there was some downtime in the target system, or even in case of error, all the negative scenarios, if you think of it, where if I would not have event-driven architecture or even broker in place, I would have lost this message and I have to re-trigger it from my S/4HANA Cloud. But in this scenario, I was able to reprocess the message based on my convenience and depending upon the type of error which it was. So this was, and with this, what we just saw, the two problems which we face in with conventional integration, that is error message retry capability, which is not there in CI, is now available in CI using EDA. Second thing is the downtime and upgrades. That something which we don't have to plan those things because we have even broker taking care of that. They are persisting the message till the time the target system is not able to consume them. The other problem which we highlighted was the processing speed. So we can also simulate that here. What we will do is, let me go to my monitoring here, and we have a Postman collection ready with us. what it will do is it will trigger the changes in BP for 20 business partner, let's say. So it will simulate that scenario for us, and then we will see these events coming to our advanced event mesh, and we will see how that is getting processed for different receivers, right? So let me trigger that. It's getting triggered. I should already see this message coming in my event broker. So if you see, yes, what we see here is that Salesforce was already able to process all the 20 messages because it was the fastest in terms of processing. My Coupa is still processing it. It is taking its time. And the marketing one is the most lowest because there I have put some delay to show the different processing speed. But the key aspect what we see here is that all these target system can have their own processing speed. And source system is totally decoupled from that complexity. Let's put it like this. And same thing which we can see is also in our monitoring here. So if I refresh the screen, I see these messages for my salesperson Coupa, it already got processed, and the marketing one is still processing it one by one because it was a soloist one. So here, the aspect of processing speed is also not a problem anymore because with Event Broker, the consumer who is consuming this message and can be controlled via these with the micro integrations, and also Event Broker process this message till the time it is processed. So that problem is also solved. The last problem which we highlighted was the flexibility and the agility in adding a new receiver. And in case of Event Broker, the only thing which we need to do is creating a new queue subscribing to this same topic. And if the consumer is able to read the message directly, we don't even need to create that micro integration. But if we need some transformation logic, which is needed by that target system, we can have the micro integration. But from adding a new receiver perspective, it's as good as creating this new queue, subscribing to the topic, and then we have the data for that receiver also, and we can set up the new integration. So this is what we wanted to show in the demo, that how when we add event-driven architecture, it solves different challenges which we have with normal conventional integration, and we should consider setting up the right governance as a first step when thinking of event-driven architecture in the landscape. So thank you. And from here, I will hand over to Christian to highlight some further benefits of having EDA from business perspective. So, yep, Christian, over to you.
All right, Sanket. Yeah, so just wanted to briefly touch on like the business justifications for event-driven architectures, right? So when I talk to customers, especially when I talk to architects and solution architects, enterprise architects and consultants, like anyone that is technical can easily see the benefits for the IT to adopt event-driven architecture, right? And I hope we've demonstrated some of those benefits as Ankit has done this very nice demo, walking us through this step by step, what that can mean. But I also want to talk about how does the business benefit from this, right? Because when architects want to introduce a new technology, you don't just do this because you like new technology, right? And sometimes that works, but most of the time the business will ask, okay, but what's in it for us, right? Like, why should we pay to implement a new thing, shiny new toy, as they sometimes call it, right? And for that, I want to just have a quick look. So IT benefits, they listed here. I think they're quite self-explanatory, also following up from the demo. But the results of this IT benefits are that we have also business benefits, right? So having reduced overall runtime, downtime, and increased robustness means for the business that they have ensured business continuity. The impact of planned or unplanned maintenance in one system is limited to that one system, and it doesn't mean that all your integrations are stopped and other systems are impacted as well. So there's a lower impact to the business overall, and at the same time, because the brokers act as shock absorber, we also can help increase revenue We can help lower the risk of reputational damage or similar through having improved performance, being able to take Black Friday events and just shock absorb those increased volumes coming in from the business and then handle them out to the applications at a speed that they can handle it, right? So improved performance, robustness, reliability. We've had customers who've benefited from the shock absorber pattern. They had previously seen that orders coming in either got duplicated or they got lost entirely, and that had obviously impact to their revenue, but also to their reputation. So they've implemented event-driven architectures and helped overcome this as well. The other benefits are accelerated innovation, so meaning faster time to market, sometimes having the possibility to just plug in another system fairly quickly can mean that the business can make use of new use cases overnight sometimes, right? When previously having to do all the integration of new systems could mean that this would take weeks or months, and that sometimes made business use cases not possible to implement. Lastly, improved customer experience is certainly something that we see a lot with customers adopting event-driven architecture, because having all your data in sync across multiple systems does give customers a better view of their own data, and you can also help answer any support queries more confidently and quickly without having to tell the customer, please call back tomorrow, I don't see your case yet, or something like that, right? So these are just some of the benefits. I hope this helps if you're talking to the business and you have to make the case to implement event-driven architecture and don't just do lift and shift. Here are some benefits that you can list that might convince the business. But obviously, this comes down to individual use cases of how high is the revenue impact of implementing event-driven architecture. Specifically, if you have cases where you see issues with the current integration, those are key use cases to look at on what you could do with event-driven integration instead. Okay, I think I'm going to hand it over to Hugo and Martin to wrap it up for us, and we'll have a Q&A as well, I believe. So over to you, Hugo.
Yes, thanks, Christian. So let me quickly share some two last things here on the meeting. First of all, thanks Ankit and Christian for the presentation and the demo and the good explanation. Very much appreciated. Thank you. And if during the presentation you got some ideas or questions, or you've been thinking about your situation, we can offer you 2 free expert sessions. One is, for example, when you think about your own situation, your own company, where could this apply and how to do this? There is this EDA expert session. You can use the QR code on the left-hand side to request such a session. And on the right-hand side, if you feel you're ready to start using Advanced Event Mesh, there is this rapid pilot program. It's 5 half days, and you really get to work with the Advanced Event Mesh. So it's 5 use cases that you're going to work through, and it is for people from either line of business or it's enterprise architects or developers. So it's in 5 half days that we walk you through the Advanced Event Mesh and get you to set up with the first use cases. So with this, go to the Q&A. While we're at the Q&A, we'll keep it open for the QR codes you can scan. So in the Q&A, Martin, while moderating the chat, the questions come in.
Yeah, we had some questions coming in also in the build-up to the webinar. One of these questions was related to how to actually start with EDA, right? What are the first steps and first initial steps that you should take, and what key considerations you need to take when you're first implementing EDA in an existing IT landscape. And I think this is a very relevant question. If one of our speakers would like to elaborate a bit more on this and share what would be the first things to take into account when just starting with EDA.
Yeah, I can take that one, Martin. So we've worked with a lot of companies over the years that have started out with event-driven architecture, and they had to go through this cycle of where you have to introduce event-driven architecture to the organization, and you have to educate a lot of people about the benefits. But one of the key takeaways, I think, for those that have gotten it right, is that you need to find a good use case to implement as a pilot. So pick a use case where some of the benefits that we listed here today can really help with that use case. Maybe you are losing orders, maybe you're duplicating orders and you want to fix that, or maybe you need better insight into certain business processes and your business has all kinds of issues with an operational cost because they don't have that insight. Whatever it may be for your business, that's for you to really judge. But if you can find that use case that shows that benefit and that is also quick and easy to implement, then that becomes a showcase for adopting event-driven architecture, right? And from that, you can then take that to your business and showcase that, and hopefully that will spur some ideas in other areas that some of your colleagues might then see, and then you will find more and more use cases to implement it on event-driven architecture. Right.
Great. Thank you very much, Christian, for this extensive answer. And there was another question that we received, which was related towards how does EDA align with, for example, SAP S/4HANA integrations. And I think this is also a very relevant question. If Ankit would like to take this one.
Yes, Martin. Yeah, it's an interesting one because we have been hearing a lot about APIs when it comes to S/4HANA, and events is now addition to that that features coming up in every release of S/4HANA. So it's good to understand that with S/4HANA, we have different integration options available. But if we look at the focus of SAP also, it's mostly towards APIs and that to OData API and events. So for every business object, we are getting standard sets of event, which we can use out of the box, but we also have the flexibility to enhance these events through standard setup and some add-ons which is available like a SAP PO, and we also have the flexibility within SAP which is AIF and other event enablement setups. With all these points, it's very clear that the focus of SAP is also towards event-driven architecture, and the addition of advanced event mesh within integration suite is also a clear sign for that. And from ensuring the integrations or investment which we are doing on these integration, it's important to have this strategy which will ensure that how we can create this mesh of brokers with these events which can be subscribed with all these cloud applications or third-party applications which needs this data. So yep, to summarize it, it's this one of the important strategy which we need to consider when it comes to integration, especially related to S/4HANA in combination with APIs.
Great. Thank you, Ankit, for elaborating more on this topic. If there are any other questions that the audience has past the webinar, feel free to contact either Solace or Rojo, or schedule one of the sessions that we already discussed. And I'll pass over to Hugo to close off the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Ankit and Christian again for answering the questions. Yeah, so we're coming on top of the hour. There's two more things. Together with Solace, we'll be also presenting at our own event here coming up. So first one is next week here in the Netherlands, and then early November, 6th of November, there is the Future of Integrations in Spain, Barcelona. So if you're interested to join, please register. And with that, I would like to thank you for attending the webinar, and have a good day to wherever you are. Thank you.